Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Konitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, chapter 66, and it's the very last verse in the chapter, text 43. Yainam Shravayim Marta Uttamashloka Vikramam Samahito Vashrinayat Sarva Papai Pramuchyate Yainam Shravayim Marta Uttamashloka Vikramam Samahito Vashrinayat Sarva Papai Pramuchyate Yainam Shravayam Martam Uttamashloka Vikramam Samahito Vashrinayat Sarva Papai Pramuchyate. Please chant. Yainam Shravayam Martam Uttamashloka Vikramam Samahito Vashrinayat Sarva Papai Pramuchyate. Yainam Shravayam Martam Uttamashloka Vikramam Samahito Vashrinayat Sarva Papai Pramuchyate. And word for word, yeah. One who. Enam, this. Shravayat, causes others to hear. Martya, a mortal human. Uttamashloka, of Lord Krishna, who is praised in the best transcendental verses. Vikramam, the heroic pastime. Samahita, with concentration. Va, all. Shrinuyat, hears. Sarva, from all. Papai, sins. Pramuchyate, becomes released. And the translation for text 43 by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada is as follows. Any mortal who recounts this heroic pastime of Lord Uttamashloka, or who simply hears it attentively, will become freed from all sins. Very extraordinary. Thus end the purport of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 10th canto, 66th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Pondrika, the False Vasudev. So no BBT purport, but there are her thoughts on this, or commentaries by Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami. So I'll begin by doing my pranam mantras, and then we'll go into the verse. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manofistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavandasya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitandasha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpataribhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Roma Padaswami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So the commentary of Srila Jiva Goswami on this particular verse is as follows. So I'm going to read it. One who recounts this exploit of the Lord, in which he punished the people of Kashi who were opposed to the Lord, or hears it with attention and faith, and that word was samahitaha, will be freed from all sins. Not only the reciter who speaks for his own good and others' benefit, but also, and that was that word va, the listener who hears for his own benefit are freed from all sins. So certainly this verse calls for some consideration because we participants, just through having actually heard this pastime or even hearing the speaker reciting the pastime. So this particular exploit, as Srila Jiva Goswami terms it, Lord Krishna's pastime and exploit, mentioned by Srila Jiva Goswami, is that of Lord Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada gives a description of the punishment of the people of Kashi, because that's what the important part was here, this final concluding section of the whole pastime. And Srila Jiva Goswami is calling attention to hearing the exploit, as he puts it, of Sri Krishna, but particularly this punishment of the people of Kashi. So here's Srila Prabhupada focusing on that aspect. So I'm going to read, it's from Krishna book, Krishna the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so Srila Prabhupada's writing. So this is after Prince Sudakshana had created a fiery demon, and that fiery demon had entered Varanasi. So here's Srila Prabhupada writing. Following just behind the fiery demon, the Sudarshan Chakra also entered Varanasi. The city has been opulent and great for a very long time. Even now, the city of Varanasi is opulent and famous, and it is one of the important cities of India. There were then many big palaces, assembly houses, marketplaces, and gates with large and very important monuments by the palaces and gates. Lecturing platforms could be found at each and every crossroad. There were buildings that housed the treasury, elephants, horses and chariots, and grain, and places for distribution of food. The city of Varanasi had been filled with all these material opulences for a very long time. But because the king of Kashi and his son Sudakshana were against Lord Krishna, the Vishnu Chakra Sudarshana, the disc weapon of Lord Krishna, devastated the whole city by burning all these important places. This excursion was more ravaging than modern bombing. The Sudarshan Chakra, having thus finished his duty, came back to his Lord, Shri Krishna, in Dwarka. So that is Srila Prabhupada describing this particular aspect of the punishment of the people of Kashi. And if one looks at the devastation that bombings cause, because we've just read Srila Prabhupada saying that this excursion, so it was like an excursion for the Sudarshan Chakra, Lord Krishna Sudarshan Chakra. He was just going on a trip to Varanasi to do something on behalf of Lord Krishna. And what the Sudarshan Chakra's excursion resulted in was ravaging that city. And Srila Prabhupada says, he does a comparison, that ravaging of the Sudarshan Chakra was more so than that is done by modern bombing. So I thought we can look at this particular comparison that's made. So if one looks at the devastation that bombings cause, usually it's measured in the current time in megatrons. So there's 6 major bombings that have taken place in our world. And one such bombing, it took place in 1961, so it's approximately 60 years ago, 65 years ago, when the Soviet Union dropped a powerful nuclear weapon on the archipelago. It was called Novaya Zemlya. It's north of the Arctic Circle. And this was calculated to be 50 megatrons. So what this translates into is like there's a fireball. And from the explosion of the fireball, 6 miles in diameter gets affected. So just from the one fireball, 6 miles gets devastated. And it's large enough, those 6 miles, it's large enough to include the entire urban core of Washington or of San Francisco or even downtown Manhattan. So that's an example of what a modern bombing does. So there was a law that was passed apparently in 1963 that if any country wanted to run tests for its bombing or its nuclear weapons, then that tests had to be done underground, not above ground. So, I mean, I don't know why that would still not cause a problem in terms of the devastation, but that was some law that was passed. But anyway, before the law was passed, there was a second test that was done. And in the same archipelago, so north of the Arctic Circle, again by the Soviet Union. And this one was 19 megatrons. So one presumes it's a smaller distance, say half, so maybe 3 miles of devastation are caused. Anyway, the 5th most powerful weapon detonated was by the United States. And this was done in 1954, so earlier than the Soviets were doing their testing. And it was done over the Marshall Islands And this particular test was called the Castle Bravo, and it had a nuclear fallout of 7,000 square miles. So it's not only that an area gets devastated, but actually there's fallout, there's radiation that spreads for 7,000 square miles. So we were just reading of like 6 square miles getting affected. So it would be the equivalent of some urban center in one of our big, or any of our big cities in America. But this particular test, so half a century ago, by the United States, it actually, the fallout affected 7,000 square miles. So apparently any one of these tests is innumerable times worse than the bomb that was dropped that destroyed 2 Japanese cities in the last World War. So if we look at what's happening in the current time, currently Russia has intensified its bombing on Ukraine. So there's a city called Kherson, which according to the Washington Post, so this is where I'm getting my information from, the journalists who are covering this for the Washington Post, they demolished the city of Kherson and its residents. So this is what the Russians have done currently. And how they're doing it is they're firing ballistic missiles, they're dropping bombs from planes, and they're lobbing artillery. And the reason for doing this, so it's very interesting. All it takes is a bad leader, just like we hearing that the Sudarshan disc did its ravaging of Kashi because the king of Kashi and the prince, his son, were opposed to Lord Krishna. In the same way, there's a problem with the leader. So in the present time, it's Vladimir Putin, because he is defying reality and other international laws. So he's not abiding by any of the laws that are there. Because he's insisting that this area of Ukraine is actually part of Russia. It used to be part of Russia, so it belongs to Russia. So he's insisting on trying to reoccupy that land. And the way of doing it is this particular method where he's actually trying to wipe out the residents. So, and why it's said that he's not in touch with reality is that actually this is taking place 1 year after Ukraine pushed back the troops, the Russian troops across the river. So they'd actually defeated the Russian troops, and then Putin's coming in a year later trying to devastate the entire area through the bombings and the missiles and the artillery. So this is interesting because you notice because Srila Prabhupada made this comparison that actually the Sudarshan disc has a much more devastating effect than any of these bombings. I've just read contemporary bombings and those within the last half centuries that were just tests. The Sudarshan disc acted in a very specific way. So it's completely targeted. It's not just like, mass destruction. What the Sudarshan disc did was that it burnt stables. So wherever there was the housing of the elephants or horses that are involved in warfare, it burnt those stables. It meant that the population of animals that would be used for warfare was wiped out. The Sudarshan just burnt the granaries, so wherever the grains were stored. So usually people have to surrender when there's no food. So the Sudarshan disc burnt the granaries. It burnt the treasury building. So generally, any king has a treasury. It's part of, the wealth that they've accrued through taxation or through the occupation of other territories and taking over other kingdoms. So the Sudarshan disc is burning the treasuries, and it's also burning the food distribution centers. So truly, That's what the devastation is. It's devastating any functionality of the city. So notice it's so targeted. And you don't read about modern bombings being targeted. You read about, some person sitting in a car at a checkpoint and some bomb is dropped and half of his leg gets lost. But you don't read about, this, like the Sudarshan disc actually heading for the major buildings that allow for the functioning of the city. So quite different. And the Sudarshan disc is described as responding to Lord Krishna's order. So perhaps these planes are responding to Putin's order, but the Sudarshan chakra is responding to Lord Krishna's order, and this is what Lord Krishna told the Sudarshan chakra: take the necessary steps to vanquish Sudakshina. This is what Lord Krishna told the Sudarshan disc. He actually has to vanquish the prince of the city. So the Sudarshan chakra made its presence known. So naturally, if a whole population's in a city, they become aware that there's an enemy force coming through sounds or lights or usually sounds and lights, and maybe there's broadcasts letting it be known. And how the Sudarshan chakra made its presence known, it appeared with an effulgence that was as bright as millions of suns. So bright it was blinding. Millions of suns. We know if you look up at the sun, it's one circular, at least in our vision, it's one circular planet some distance away, and it's very bright to even look at that one circle. But the Sudarshan disc, it was like millions of suns. So completely blinding. That was the effulgence of the Sudarshan chakra. And also the description is that the heat generated from the Sudarshan chakra was as powerful as that created at the end of the cosmic manifestation. So intense heat and this blinding light. So that is what the residents of Kashi were experiencing. There's mention that people in the present time, like in Ukraine or even persons in the Gaza Strip, they start to be able to live with the constant bombing. It becomes like something that they just deal with. It becomes part of their life. But you notice here how different the Sudarshan disc is, that actually it's just completely blinds everyone. The heat is overwhelmingly impossible to deal with. So there's no such thing as living with. And of course, it's also that the Sudarshan disc executes the task very cleanly and efficiently. It's not drawn on for, you hear, months and months, and it's very targeted and specific. So, there's this also written in Krishna book by Srila Prabhupada. By his effulgence, the Sudarshan also illuminated the entire universe on the surface of the earth as well as in outer space. So dramatic. It's not just that the people of the one city are seeing this bright light, this illumination of the Sudarshan disc, but the entire universe is experiencing this incredibly bright effulgence of the Sudarshan disc of Lord Krishna. And even outer space is getting lit up. So you can see how powerful this one weapon of Lord Krishna is. And here's more writing from Srila Prabhupada. Then the Sudarshan chakra began to freeze the fiery demon created by Lord Shiva. Because we just heard the demon preceded the Sudarshan chakra. And remember, it's a fiery demon. So he had the task to kill Lord Krishna. So he had first gone to Dwarka, but he was unsuccessful. And then he made his way to Varanasi. So here's what happened. The Sudarshan chakra began to freeze the fiery demon created by Lord Shiva. In this way, the fiery demon was checked by the Sudarshan chakra of Lord Krishna. And being defeated in his attempt to devastate the city of Dwarka, he turned back. Having failed to set fire to Dwarka, the fiery demon went back to Varanasi, the kingdom of Kashiraj. As a result of his return, all the priests who had helped to instruct the black art of mantra, along with their employer Sudakshana, that's Prince Sudakshana, were burnt to ashes by the glaring effulgence of the demon. So the Sudarshan disc didn't have to actually even wipe out the prince. The fiery demon himself that they had created came and destroyed them. And there's mention, because this is the interesting thing, it was just the effulgence of the demon that destroyed the priests and Prince Sudakshana. So even the Sudarshan dish didn't have to do that. It was the effulgence of the demon, the fiery demon that was created by Lord Shiva, that actually destroyed the very persons who had created or invoked that demon. So there's mention, because we're looking at this whole power of the effulgence. So I described something of the Sudarshan disk effulgence and how it, lit up the whole universe and even outer space. And now we're hearing that the effulgence from the fiery demon was able to destroy the priests and Prince Sudakshana, the priests who had got into the black art of mantra meditation to evoke this creature from the fire, from the sacrificial fire. So, just looking at this point of what the effulgence of either the Sudarshan disk or this fiery demon has done, there's another point that's brought up about what the effulgence of the Sudarshan disk can do. And this is in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 24th chapter. There's a mention that there's a subterranean heaven, an imitation heaven, so in this place, when the Sudarshan disk enters those provinces, there may be pregnant women, because this is actually a demoniac place, the subterranean heaven, but it's been made very beautiful because there's an extraordinary architect who's able to actually, even though there's no light, it may not be such a very nice place, through his mystic powers, he's actually able to create a very beautiful place. And so it's called an imitation heaven. But there comes a time when the Sudarshan disk arrives there to bring about death. And when it enters, the first thing that happens, because of the effulgence, this bright light that basically lights up the whole universe, the pregnant wives of demons that are living in that subterranean heavenly place, you could say imitation heavenly place, they actually immediately have miscarriages because of experiencing fear because of the effulgence of the Sudarshan disk. So that's mentioned also, just on this point of how powerful just this effulgence is of the Sudarshan disk. And just to say a little bit more about this imitation heaven, it's a place where actually there's no mental anxiety. So like we walk around, we have some anxiety in the mind, about this, that, the other, something that's happened in the past, something that may be coming up. In that particular place, these demons have no mental anxieties. And they also don't have any physical diseases. Like in our world, you basically, any person you speak to has got some physiological difficulty of some kind or another. But in the subterranean imitation heavenly place, these demoniac entities residing there, they actually have no physical diseases. And they don't age. And they don't even fear death. So just by seeing old people, you're reminded of your own death. Now, if you live in a place where actually there's no aging, you're not walking around fearing death. I mean, any time you see an old person here, you're reminded, oh, death is coming. And in addition, these persons in the subterranean imitation heaven, they actually don't experience something that's in our world. Like as the body dress, looking very bedraggled. And the reason for this is that there's a fatigue or a lack of energy and enthusiasm that happens in old age. Because the body's giving in, then one can't be so enthusiastic about living. So, and this is something that actually is not experienced in the subterranean heavenly place. So the only thing that they have to be concerned about is the moment when death presents itself. So when the Sudarshan effulgence is there, that's when there's fear. But the rest of the time, there's no fear. So very interesting. And Srila Prabhupada puts it this way: the influence of the Sudarshan disc will not allow their so-called material happiness to endure. So there's a reality check. Even though it's an imitation heaven, I mean, the description is there of how the architect of the demons is able to create a place where trees look like they're bending down because they've got so many fruits and flowers. There's beautiful lakes, there's beautiful flowers decorating the lakes like red lotuses. Like it's all like idyllic. But then, here's Srila Prabhupada's comment: the Sudarshan disc will not allow their so-called material happiness to endure. So there's a reality check. Now, going back to, because this was this comparison of Srila Prabhupada, what happens in the present time with bombings is that they generally happen in the night. So it's so wicked. People are sleeping or resting, or it's a moment where they're thinking they've got relief from the suffering of, constant noise of artillery, etc. But that's when, in this wicked time, the bombings happen at night. And so this is how it's been happening in Ukraine. You read that it's night bombings. And here's a description of one of the residents of this city of Kherson. Oh, actually, he's a resident 50 miles away, 50 miles. But anyway, he landed up in Kherson because of going through some border check and experiencing one of the explosions. So this is what he says: our village is almost gone. They shoot sometimes from tanks and guided aerial bombs. They destroy everything. I don't know why they shoot like this. So of course, why the shooting is going on with what they have is that there's a desire to destroy all the residents. So according to the black art mantras instructed in the tantras, if the mantra fails to kill the enemy, then because it must kill someone, it kills the original creator. So Sudakshana was the original creator, and all the priests assisted him, and therefore all of them were burned to ashes. Now, the point made by Srila Jiva-Goswami is that if one is hearing of the punishment of the people of Kashi who were opposed to Lord Krishna, then one will become freed from all sins, whether one is the speaker or the hearer. So this is very interesting, because generally when you're hearing about people suffering, like the people in Ukraine, one feels sympathy. But here it is that just hearing of the punishment by the Sudarshan disc or even the fiery demon turning against Prince Sudakshana, one can actually become freed from sins. So this is interesting to look at. So this is what Krishna says about becoming freed from sinful reaction. It's connected to understanding Krishna's supreme position. So this is how that becoming free from sins takes place. It has to go with an understanding that Sudarshan disc belongs to Lord Krishna, and then what is Lord Krishna's actual position. So Krishna himself puts it this way. So this is Krishna talking in Bhagavad Gita 10.3. Yo mam ajam anadim cha veti loka maheshwaram asamudha samateshu sarva papaya pramuchate. He who knows me as the unborn, beginningless, as the supreme Lord of all the worlds, he only, undeluded among men, is freed from all sins. So, this is how this becoming free from all sins takes place, by having heard this particular destruction of Kashi. To be undeluded, or to know, involves making the distinction between the Supreme Lord and living entities. So that's the first thing that has to be there. You have to be able to make that distinction. Because living entities are taking birth and they die due to their attachment, their material attachment. So the implication is that regular souls, with their learned patterns, because as we're interacting with material nature, we're becoming attached to various things. So the mind looks for those things that we're attached to. So conditioned souls, because of this attachment, they create their next body. So they're changing their bodies. And the Lord's body, on the other hand, is something that has not to be changed. When he comes to the material world, he comes in the same spiritual body. He's not born, he's unborn. So this is the distinction one has to be able to make as one's hearing this pastime. There's a difference between the persons that are getting destroyed and the Supreme Lord. And it rests on this fact that regular living entities, even the demons, as I was describing, who appear to be in this imitation heaven, still they have to change bodies. And the Lord is different because he's coming as an unborn being. There's a further understanding or knowing which frees one from the delusion or from delusion, and that's knowing that the Lord is the supreme proprietor of the planetary system of the universe. So this is a very, you could say, subtle understanding, because if one's seen the Sudarshan disc, one has to think that this Sudarshan disc belongs to the Supreme Lord. And then this understanding of his position is knowing him as the proprietor or the owner of all the planetary systems in the universe. So not only, we're in this particular world, this earth, so the Supreme Lord is the owner of this earth and the universe that we're in. He's the owner of all the other universes too, including even those subterranean planets that I was just describing, and the heavenly planets. So he was existing before his creation, and he's different from his creation. That's the particular point. So Krishna is different from anything that's created. He's different from the demigods because they're created by him. So, for example, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. So knowing this means that one is liberated from all sinful reactions. So one has to understand this well. And this is what allows one to become freed from all sinful reactions. Means that you don't have to then experience reactions that are fructifying in the present time. You don't have to actually experience reactions that are coming up ahead, and you don't have to experience the reactions that you're carrying they still have to fructify. So this knowing is achieved through connecting with Lord Krishna, in service to him, in a mood of devotion, knowing what his position is. And he described that, knowing him as the unborn, the beginningless, as the supreme Lord of all the worlds. So that's the why one is making that connection, having that understanding, and then gradually coming to realize it. And that's that knowing that frees one from sinful reaction. And it means that also one's heart is offered in devotion to Krishna. This is S.N.10.66.43. It means that when you're offering your heart to Lord Krishna, it becomes endowed with good fortune, or Lakshmi, you could say, being the object of her affection because of bhakti to the Lord. So once, just by offering one's heart to Lord Krishna, good fortune is coming to one, and which means that sins are destroyed at the root, because any sin that's carried in the heart has to be destroyed when the heart is being offered to Lord Krishna, because it's in connection to that supreme Lord who brings great good fortune. And so it's for this reason, and in this verse today we read that Krishna is praiseworthy. His qualities make him praiseworthy. So he's known as Uttama Shloka. And Lord Shiva himself says of Lord Krishna, because after all, this was part of this pastime, that Lord Shiva was the cause, you could say, of this fiery demon, because he allowed for this fiery demon to be created from that sacrificial fire. But of course, he'd given the particular adjunct that this demon could only be used against those that were opposed to Brahminical culture. So things worked out that indeed the very creators who were opposed to Lord Krishna, and who were opposed, therefore, to Brahminical culture themselves, were the ones that got killed, and not Lord Krishna, as was their intention. So this is what Lord Shiva says of Lord Krishna. After he sees, and this is from an earlier pastime, he's seeing how the Sudarshan disc is cutting off his devotee, Lord Shiva's devotee, Banasura's arms. And this is what he says to Lord Krishna: you alone are the absolute truth, the supreme light, the mystery hidden within the verbal manifestation of the absolute. Those whose hearts are spotless can see you, for you are uncontaminated like the sky. So this verbal manifestation that Lord Shiva refers to, that Lord Krishna is hidden within the verbal manifestation. So there's a sound within which Krishna is revealed, like we know the Maha Mantra. That's how Lord Krishna reveals himself, through the Maha Mantra sound, his own name. And Srila Jiva Goswami says, Gadham Param Brahma Manusya Lingam, which refers to the supreme truth concealed in a human-like form. So you get some idea of who Lord Krishna is just by hearing from these great personalities, and through their words, you get an understanding of his being unborn and beginningless. And Srila Jiva Goswami refers to Lord Krishna as the supreme truth concealed in a human-like form. So this was the mistake that had been made, and that was how this whole pastime had taken place, because a mistake was made by King Pandrika. He just saw Lord Krishna in a human form. He didn't understand that the supreme truth is concealed in a human-like form. And there's also this mention, that this is just how Krishna is concealed in a verbal manifestation. In the Purva Kanda 23, there's this statement: one realizes that supreme Godhead by first realizing one's own self. Tam he devam atam priti prakasham. So one has to make that connection with the Supreme Lord, and then through making that connection with the Supreme Lord, in our case, in our present time, in his being, in his name, so the chanting of the Maha Mantra, then one comes to realize one's own self as a spiritual being connected to that Supreme Being. So, hence Srila Jiva Goswami's statement that through punishment one can understand Lord Krishna's value. By hearing of one who punishes those who associate with the wicked, one becomes free from all suffering. So, again, that capacity of Lord Krishna to punish the wicked immediately should, by implication, make one aware of his position, and having some understanding of that position comes through this hearing, and hence making that connection with Lord Krishna and gradually coming to know factually his position is what's destroying the synthetal reactions that are being carried in the heart, and even those reactions that are being manifest in the present time. So these are some thoughts on this particular text. If there's some questions, some thoughts, some queries, some expansion of the discussion, please feel free. I can pass the microphone. No? Our audience is very shy. It's been broadcast, so you'll have to use the microphone.
Like in a city, there may be some good people too, right? So if everybody is wiped out, then...
So the question is, is there not consideration to be given to the fact that if one's looking at, this whole description that a city is being wiped out, should one not be considering that in any city there would be good and bad people? So then if the entire population has been wiped out, isn't there a question? Some good people are there, they're also being wiped out. Well, the description that we read during this past time is very significant because when the king of Kashi had gone into battle against Lord Krishna, together with King Pondraka, who was presenting himself as being as the supreme being, even dressing like Lord Krishna, carrying it to an extreme. King Kashi had told the residents that he's actually going to bring back Lord Krishna's head. And because of making that statement, and because, it's natural that persons that have a particular ruler, they're loyal to the ruler in some, you could say. The residents were basically in support of the king of Kashi, the ruler who had made this statement. So at the time when Krishna defeated the king of Kashi, he used his disc to sever the head of the king of Kashi. And what he did was he sent the head flying back to Kashi. So the king of Kashi's head landed in the city. I mean, there's a nice description because it was sent by Lord Krishna that it was almost like a lotus flower carried by the wind, the head of the king of Kashi. So some beauty got attributed to it because it was an action performed by Lord Krishna's Sudarshan disc. So that head landed in the city, and the residents were thinking, oh, this must be the head of Lord Krishna, like the king of Kashi told us, Kashi Raj told us, that he's going to bring back the head of Krishna. And then they looked more closely and they became aware of, oh no, it's got earrings. Oh no, it's actually the head of the king. It's the head of our king. And of course they started wailing. But the point is that they were in support of the king of Kashi, who was opposed to Lord Krishna. And Lord Krishna, being in his supreme position, he actually chose to punish the residents too, seeing them as wicked because they were behind their king. So, you brought up the possibility, hypothetical possibility, that there may have been some good persons because it's a city. Well, Krishna clearly saw that all the residents needed to receive punishment. So hence the deprivation of the grains, the foodstuff, the loss of the animals. That was how he chose to punish through the Sudarshan disc. And in fact, in the present time too, whenever you read of famine, you can take it that that's suffering from some sinful activity done. So sinful activity means that one is acting contrary to religious principles or contrary to how religion is being established by Lord Krishna, because that's his position. He's maintaining order, and it allows for upliftment of consciousness and the whole of human society through acknowledging his position. So if there's denial of his position, then some punishment comes. And, one could say, like you said, when there's whole-scale punishment of an entire city or country, is it overlooking the good people? Well, if they're good people means that they're adhering to religious principles, and they would be carrying the correct understanding that this punishment is due to my living in a place where the majority of people are opposed to Lord Krishna. And I'm living in this place too, so I accept what Lord Krishna has meted out. So the attitude is different. It's accepting Lord Krishna has made this arrangement. So just by that acceptance, one's consciousness is being elevated, one's heart's getting cleansed from reactions to sinful activities, because one's consciousness is in the right place. So the good person, so to speak, is the one who's carrying transcendental knowledge and is acting in that consciousness throughout. So in actual fact, that person isn't suffering. That person's not suffering because they have that connection with the source, their very source, because as a spirit soul, one's connected to Lord Krishna. So there's always a state of happiness in that connection. But those that deny the existence of Lord Krishna or directly oppose religious principles, they have to suffer the consequences. And in this particular pastime, the consequences were very specific. It's very specific. You get a punishment that has to do with your consciousness, where your consciousness is. And the king of Kashi was directly opposed to Lord Krishna. I mean, to the extent that he was joining up with King Pandrika to try and kill Lord Krishna and even boasting to his subjects. So that's very direct blasphemy. So thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.